One of the frequent conversations that I have had with clients in therapy is when they arrive for their session and they say, my friend is depressed, or my sister is depressed, my mum is depressed, my partner is depressed. And the levels of distress that go with that are really high, because being the friend who is in the supportive position is really difficult for a whole number of reasons. And so in this video, we're going to look at some really practical handles of what you can do to support somebody who is depressed. I'm Dianne. I'm a clinical psychologist. If you're new here, welcome. Feel free to subscribe and introduce yourself in the comments. So before we jump into some of the practical how-tos, I want to take a moment to explain the underlying mechanisms of depression, because there is a process to depression. And when we understand this, it can be really helpful in giving us a broader understanding of what the person that we are trying to support is going through. So if you think about every experience that we go through in life as a bubble, every bubble, every experience has got an emotion that's attached to that bubble. Now, we don't like, as human beings, discomfort. And so human instinct is that when discomfort comes up, so emotional pain, emotional distress that comes up, and we work really hard and often really effectively to push that pain and that discomfort away. And most of the time, that looks like one of two things. Either we will distract ourselves and get preoccupied with other things, or we will go into a very logical problem-solving state where we're thinking very logically about the discomfort or the experience that we've had. Depression happens when we take that emotion, so the emotion that's attached to the experience, we take that emotion and we squash it down, or we push it aside, and we don't spend enough time processing those emotions. That tends to be when we get stuck in a depressed state. And if you think about a container, all of us have a certain capacity to hold unfinished business, to hold emotions, to hold experiences that life throws at us. When your container is full, then what tends to happen is it will leak. It will start to spill over. And so people with depression will often say things like, somebody said something really small to me and it wasn't such a big deal, but it completely tipped me over the edge. Or they will start crying unexpectedly, or they will be really agitated. And that's because depression is really an accumulation of unfinished business because we haven't processed. And so emotional processing is the space that we tend to work on in depression. So where do you come in? As the supportive friend or family member or loved one, your role is really significant, because when the part of your brain that holds distress is activated, and you couple that with a part of your brain that feels connection and belonging, you put those two things together, that's a very, very profound and healing experience for the person, because what it triggers in your brain, the message that is sent is that I'm connected, I belong. And when I belong, this pain that I'm experiencing and this difficulty that I'm having is okay. The person feels more equipped to be able to deal with that. And so one of the biggest things that we look for when assessing somebody, particularly who's got depression or any mental health difficulty for that matter, is how much social support does the person have and how much are they able to draw on that? Because this is such a profound thing. We are wired as human beings for love and belonging. And so you as a supportive person, I want to give you some really practical handles. So let's jump right in. My biggest tip is don't try to fix it. Give the other person permission to feel everything that they feel for as long as they need to feel it. It can be really helpful for us to think about emotions as a way of communicating that something's not right. So if we think about physical pain in the body, usually that's a signal that something in your body is not okay, and we tend to that pain. We will pay attention to whatever that signal is and appropriately respond. Emotional pain is exactly the same. They are signals that something's not okay, that we need to tend to some unfinished business, and we need to create some conditions so that our brains can process the distress and the discomfort and all of those emotions. So listen. That's it. Just listen without asking them if they've tried this or if they've tried that or what they're doing to try and fix it. Let them be depressed. That's okay. One of the things that comes up for us in the supportive position is a feeling of helplessness. We don't like to be helpless as human beings. And so our instinct, our response to that is to, I can fix it for you, exercise more, or eat better food, or we come up with all of these amazing solutions. But what actually ends up happening when you do that is the person feels invalidated, and it makes them feel worse about themselves, because oftentimes underneath the surface for the person who is depressed is a thought spiral of, I feel so bad. Why can I not do such simple things? What's wrong with me? And there is this shame cycle that already comes up. They already are so aware that something's not right. And when you try to fix it for them, they've probably already tried many of those things and it hasn't worked. And so they end up feeling more like a failure and more invalidated. In a nutshell, we want to communicate to them, I can see that you're struggling, and that's okay. Sometimes it's okay to not be okay. Sometimes it's okay to struggle. Sometimes it's okay to be stuck. And there is something magical that happens when we create those conditions and we give the person space to feel everything that they want to feel. Their brain will naturally activate their capacity for problem solving. But when we do that, when we try to push the person towards logic and reason prematurely, it ends up fueling the depression because they stay stuck for longer because they haven't had the time or space to actually process those emotions. My second tip is don't be afraid to ask questions. One of the first things that people do when they feel depressed is they withdraw and they isolate themselves. And this is because when people feel so raw and so vulnerable, and the element of shame pops up, they don't want other people to see them in that condition. And so they pull away. Connection, as I mentioned earlier, is one of the most significant keys for helping somebody. And the solution is often in listening. So many times, how the scenario goes is that depressed person and supportive person have a conversation. Depressed person shares how much they're struggling with. Supportive person listens to that and they come away feeling really heavy. The depressed person, I guarantee you, will come away from that conversation if they haven't felt invalidated and haven't felt judged and they felt like it's a safe space where they could share some of their struggle. The depressed person comes away feeling lighter. The supportive person comes away feeling completely overwhelmed and they might not sleep that night and they're going, oh my goodness, this is so bad. What do? I feel so helpless. My loved one is struggling so much. And I feel so compelled to fix it for them. And what I often remind the person in the supportive position is that you listening, you sitting with the person in their pain and just being there, hearing their story and hearing their pain and validating how they feel is the solution. You don't have to fix it. You don't have to take the depression away. But there is a very big difference between fixing and supporting. Supporting is really useful. You cannot fix it for the other person. You cannot carry the burden. You cannot take the responsibility for them. But do not underestimate what a long way it goes to sit and to listen and to be there and to light up the part of the brain of the depressed person that goes, I'm connected, I belong, I'm safe, and that's okay. So ask questions. Sometimes because depressed people are so good at withdrawing and isolating and shutting out the world, don't take it personally. It's absolutely not about you. It's about the fact that they are hiding in their own shame. Sometimes you have to go and seek them out and you have to be a little bit intrusive to really pull them out and to communicate that they can share and you're okay with their raw vulnerability. You're not here to judge. So really practically, some questions that could be useful. How are you feeling? What can I do to help? Is there anything that you need right now? Sometimes you can check in. Would you like some space or would you like to talk about it? Sometimes it might be that you really have to pull it out of them and say something like, I would really like to understand what you're going through. Would you mind sharing some of your story with me? So ask the questions. And when they do share what they're struggling with, you validate it. There's something so significant and powerful in emotional processing when we feel that our emotions and our experiences are validated. And so that's something really simple, like, it sounds like you're dealing with a lot, or that seems like it's been really hard for you, or I can absolutely understand why you feel the way that you feel. When we do that, the person feels validated. When a person's emotions feel validated, we are creating conditions for their brain to naturally process those emotions. Some of those bubbles that we've been collecting for such a long period of time start to pop, and we feel a little bit lighter. The depressed person will feel a little bit lighter. My last tip is ask them to help with something. Now, this is something that you have to kind of toe the line with, because if somebody is so severely depressed that they feel absolutely debilitated and unable to function in any way, asking them to help with something can make them feel worse. But most of the time, it can be a really useful tool to get them out of their own head, to get them out of their own story, spend some time in that story and asking them the questions and validating. And also we want to shift that story. And so there's something very profound that happens. If you take somebody who's depressed and you put them with somebody else who's depressed, let's say, and you say to one depressed person, it's your responsibility to take care of this depressed person. What happens is the person who is taken care of gets a little bit unstuck because they're not so consumed in their own thoughts anymore, because there is a very practical problem that needs to be solved right in front of them. And this can be a really powerful tool. People like competence. We like to feel like we're being successful and we're doing something well. And so this can be really, really simple, like, I really need help designing my garden landscape. Would you come to the nursery with me and help me choose some plants? It's not in a condescending way, but giving them some sense of, actually, I really value your inputs and you are really valuable to me, is the message that we are sending with that. If we can learn to offer support in this way, and I emphasize learn because this is a process, this doesn't come naturally. This sometimes goes against our instinct to want to fix it, to want to problem solve. But if we can learn to do this, it goes such a long way in making the other person feel connected, like they belong, like they're seen, and validating those experiences. If we can create those conditions for a person who's struggling with depression, they are significantly more likely to move in their own process towards problem solving. Problem solving is not the responsibility of the supportive person. Actually, that person who's depressed has a lot of capacity for problem solving. But what happens when you're depressed is there is a part of your brain that's lit up that dysregulates your emotions, that makes you feel really bad. And that part of your brain cannot be lit up at the same time as the part of your brain that holds logic and reason and is responsible for problem solving. And so I think about this in a 3-step process. Here's the problem. Number 1, the problem comes up. Number 2, create some conditions for emotional processing. And if we do that, what happens is naturally number 3 becomes the person's own capacity for problem solving is activated. I hope that was helpful. If it was, feel free to like and share this video, and I will see you in my next video.